Good morning, everybody. A warm welcome from Berlin. As usual, we have another video prepared for you. And today we are going to talk about nested runbooks within our portfolio. So nested runbooks are available in the latest version of Netcool Operations Insight 1.6.7, I guess, and in the Cloud Pak for Watson AIOps version 3.6. And today I do have Sebastian with me, and I'd like to hand over to him for a short introduction, please.
Hey, hello Fred. Hello everybody. I'm glad to be here. My name is Sebastian Wegmann. I'm the Runbook Automation lead architect for the development of that component inside the both products that Fred mentioned before. I'm excited to introduce the Nested Runbooks feature today. So thank you, Fred, for inviting me.
Welcome, as usual. So we already recorded a couple of videos around Runbook automation as well as other capabilities within the portfolio. And Nested Runbooks is a new thingy, which has just been released in the latest and greatest versions. And to introduce that topic, we have prepared a few things. So as usual, we do have this presentation. Sebastian is going to talk a little bit deeper into the topic, as well as he is going to run a demo. And we're going to provide you with the links into the documentation afterwards as well. The agenda for today is we're going to talk a little bit about what is the problem, why do we have nested runbooks, then what are nested runbooks really? We're talking about the use cases, potential benefits that we think about, and during the demo we're going to show you what the user interface looks like and how the configuration is done. That's what we're going to do. But before we do all that, we'd like to set the scene and give you a short introduction of what is the Cloud Pak for Watson AIOps. So this very busy architecture slide shows you what it is addressing. So the left side, we do have all the input parameters. These are various sorts of data. This is structured data and unstructured data in the meaning of events, information about something has been broken, or log files, or information about how things are connected, that's topology, or inputs from various third-party systems like a CMDB, and so on and so on and so on. And the Cloud Pak for Watson AIOps takes all that and merges it together via a staged approach. So we have various stages. The first stage is we are going to provide you with single panes of glass within a topic. So we do have a component which is dealing about event management, a component which is doing log management, metric management, and so on and so on. And then we are combining all these capabilities with our central AI capability and provide you the outputs via the user interfaces. We're connecting the results also via APIs. So everything that we do within our product is available via APIs, and we do have out-of-the-box integrations as well. So for example, if you want to create a trouble ticket or want to dump data somewhere in the third-party system, that is all there. As you know, the basis, the genes of the products are there for quite a long time. The latest add-ons, the Watson capabilities, the AI capabilities, all these are more recent developments, and all that creates the offering that we have today. And at the moment, today's video is talking about runbooks. When we're talking about getting data into the system, correlating data, enhancing, enriching, and so on and so on, and then finally, you know what kind of problems you have, what they are impacting, and then you want to do something about it. And that's exactly what Runbook automation addresses. So this is here on the right side where it comes to automate and fix. This is where Runbook automation is part of the solution. So Runbook automation is when you want to do something about a specific problem. You have a procedure, step-by-step procedure. You may have scripts that can be executed against the backend systems. All that is something we can use within Runbook automation. And with that, I think I'm going to hand over to you, Sebastian.
Okay, thank you, Fred. For the introduction of Runbooks and Runbook automation, I want to quickly reiterate some of the basics, how Runbooks work. Fred already mentioned that there is automation going on. And if there's automation going on, there's also the other concept of a manual runbook. So I'm going to start with the maturity levels of runbooks, as we call them, where customers typically evolve the runbooks from a manual description to a semi-automated and then maybe even a fully automated runbook. So for the manual runbooks, you can see some of the benefits you get when writing a manual runbook right on the screen. We do have the concept of parameters. Parameters can have different types. You see on the upper right-hand side, we do have string parameters, we do have hidden password parameters, we do have parameters that can contain something like a date or a number or even a Boolean parameter. In the screenshot below, you can see we do have steps in our runbooks, and you can easily distinguish them between a manual step, like the step 1, who is using some of the elements that we allow in there, like commands and jumping to the end of the runbook, and also an automated step, which encapsulates previously defined automation asset that you can reuse in any kind of runbooks and that performs a specific type of action depending on what type of automation you are dealing with or have created before. And currently we support 3 different types. The HTTP action, which does an HTTP call, can be any HTTP call that you want to automate. The script action, which can perform any script on a server you supply, and an Ansible action, which is available if you connect an Ansible tower, or as it is now called, an Ansible automation controller to the system. And then you have access to all the playbooks and job templates that are available on that system as well. Going forward, a manual runbook is a structured guidance. It has special elements for all the different things that you typically need when solving IT problems. So we do have commands in there that you can easily copy and paste. We do have parameters that replace different parts of the text with the content of the parameter. In this case, you can see we do have a PS command, and we do want to check a Java process. This way you can parameterize the command without having to manually replace certain strings in there. We do have the notion of different steps that can be acted upon and applied in order. And at the end, we do have the provide feedback feature that allows immediate feedback from the operator who is running that runbook to the author who is maintaining the runbook library, which is a very important part of keeping those manual runbooks and those procedures up to date and on a high quality level, and also giving guidance to the runbook authors who see which kind of runbooks do really provide benefit in the organization and which kind of runbooks maybe need a little bit of extra work to make them really useful. Another benefit of having those manual runbooks in the system, as well as all the other runbooks, is that you gain tracking and auditing of all the runbook activities. So whenever somebody is launching a runbook and stepping through it, you will have a record of these, and you can easily check in the activity screen who did what runbook in the past, how often specific runbooks ran, and what the results were. Going on to the semi-automated runbook, these have a combination of manual and automated steps. On the right-hand side, you can see how it looks like if there is an automated step that displays the runbook UI server information. So an easy HTTP call to our very own API interface. And you can see that there is metadata available, how long it did run, when it started running, what the return code was, and the status. And we also have introduced in a previous update the capability to filter the output. If there is a large output, and in this case it's a JSON document, you can provide a search syntax on a JSON document that is typically the JSON path filtering query language, and you can just filter to the output that you actually want to see, and then you just have the information that you really want, and not the whole answer from the server, which is very useful to be used in combination with other features that we have, like passing the results from one automation to the next step. As I said before, we have 3 different types: script, HTTP, and Ansible automation controller. And depending on what kind of IT environment you have, you will typically use one or the other, or on the use case that you have. If you already have an HTTP REST interface that you want to interact with, the HTTP automation, for example, is like the obvious candidate to automate your interactions in the environment. Now, if you have replaced all of the manual steps in a runbook, the runbook may be run in a fully automated mode. That just means that it can run as such. It doesn't need to be, so you can still call it manually and step through it. But if it has this fully automated capability, it means it can be integrated in some of the automated flows that are present in Watson for AIOps and in the NOI product suite. These are both basically the same from a runbook perspective, but there are different mechanisms on how to do it. For NOI, we do have triggers. So you can set up triggers, which are then stored in the impact service. And if an event comes in that matches the trigger conditions, the runbook will automatically be run. And since it contains only automations and doesn't need human interaction, it will run fully in the background and hopefully resolve what caused the alert to come in the first place. Same thing for Watson for AIOps. In this case, it's called a policy, and the policy template is called assign a runbook to alerts. You're basically doing the same thing. You are defining on what kind of condition you want to run which runbook and what kind of data from the originating alert you want to use as parameters. Without further ado, let's move into our very new feature we have on our hands right now. The Nested Runbook feature is an exciting new feature because it's a really big value proposition for a lot of customers. A lot of customers have asked us specifically to do something like that in the past. Why have they asked us to do this? So what's the problem that we try to solve? For some customers, we have seen that many times throughout the past years, there are a lot of procedures. So there is not just a small amount of a dozen or so runbooks. There are a lot of procedures that have to be followed. And many of them contain common steps or sections. If you want to follow the 5 steps on the right-hand side, you always need to log into a machine. You need to check the status, perform the update, check the status again, and then log out. But the middle part, the perform the update, that's like the real payload of what you want to do. And this may be very different things, but log into a certain machine is always going to be the same no matter what you do. So you want to reuse that asset. Otherwise, it becomes very tedious to maintain your runbook library on a level that makes sense. And I think we all know if documentation is getting outdated, people will less and less rely on that documentation and look elsewhere for the information they seek. Especially important if your log into the machine process does change in your company because of a system change or a company-wide update. You need to touch all of these procedures again, and that can be a hassle, especially at scale. What are nested runbooks? So the general concept is that you can reuse an existing runbook and place it inside another runbook. For this feature, we have invented a new runbook step type runbook. So as I said before, we do have the manual steps and we do have the automated steps, and now we also have the runbook steps. So if you are familiar with the first 2 concepts, you will immediately have a grasp of what the third concept will mean. So we're referencing a runbook from inside of another one, but also at the same time, for anybody who is running the runbooks, we made it so that it is as invisible as possible while still providing all the information. And what I mean by that is that the experience of running a runbook is the same. You don't need to learn anything different. You would just get a small indication that this runbook is in fact a nested runbook, but you don't need that information to perform the runbook actions as before. So in our example that we have on the right-hand side, we can now replace the generic login to a machine with a single runbook and reference that from a lot of other runbooks, and also replace the generic logout and replace that in a lot of runbooks. If you have a lot of these common small steps, you just have to write them once and update them once, and all the other runbooks will immediately pick up the changes. And if you have complex procedures that happen in several places, you can also foster a collaborative approach where you can give a simple procedure to the subject matter expert at hand and let him or her write the runbook for that procedure, and let other people write the procedures for other runbooks, and then just build it together by using that runbook step type.
It's a little bit like stored procedures or database triggers or all these kind of pre-built automation capabilities.
Yeah, that's right. The general concept is not a new one. It's also a little bit like inheritance from some of the object-oriented program languages. It's not 100% the same thing, but it shares several aspects. And the reuse concept, like stored procedures and other things like that, is successful for that very reason, because it allows you to reach a higher level of sophistication and a higher level of reusability and maintaining a larger set of things without scaling up the effort that you need to maintain it.
And it's a little bit logical, I think. So our largest customer is using something like 3,000 runbooks in production. And when you do have that amount of runbooks, you do have common things that you do in quite a number of runbooks again and again. And if you can encapsulate that and reuse that, that makes it easier for even programming and building these kind of things, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. That's exactly the point. Typically, what customers did in the past when they reached such a scale was to rely heavily on automation that does the repeating task for them. But it really shouldn't be that way, right? If you know that things are common, you should change it once and then have it for everything. And that's exactly the benefit that we try to reach here with the nested runbook feature. And it also is stated here on that slide. So the risk of errors is greatly reduced when you just have to do one change and review one change, and you don't have to do it 100 times, because even the most trivial repetitive task gets hard to do it right every time if you have to do it 100, 200, or even more times. And you can also build like more encapsulated generic runbooks that don't have the greatest complexity already, because you can do that in isolation and do those in isolation and only go into the more complex use cases when you are actually building the biggest complex runbooks out of the different runbooks that you already have. And the duplicate runbook steps, I mean, we all know, I guess, the scenario of you're searching for something and then you find 3 assets which basically all say the same thing, and you wonder which one is the best one, which one is the most current one, the best maintained. This helps you reduce that problem as well. This is a quick screenshot of the user interface. I will go into the demo quickly, but you can see here that we have been building upon what we already have. As I said, there is now a new runbook step that you can add, just like a manual step or an automated step. All the controls that deal with it are basically staying the same. And if you have added an automated step to a runbook, then adding a runbook step to a runbook will feel really similar. So let's jump on over to the demo, shall we?
Absolutely. Let's get into it. Okay, now you're sharing. So what do we see?
Okay, so now we are into our Cloud Pak for Watson AIOps. The interfaces look basically the same for the NOI deployment. The main difference is here this navigation structure on the left-hand side that's different for the two products. For Watson AIOps, if you want to reach this screen, you go to Automations here, and then you arrive at this screen, and the runbooks and actions are on the second and third tab. Right now we are looking at our screen. So what I'm going to do in the next few minutes is just creating some basic examples to show you how the UI works, how the different things like parameter mappings and other capabilities work together, so that you have a comprehensive overview of what you can achieve with the nested runbooks and have seen how it works a few times. I'm just going to create a new runbook right now. This is our screen. You can already see the add nested runbook step is right there. So I'm going to start with a runbook that is going to be integrated into others. I'm going to call that the inner runbook and the others the outer runbook. There are different names on how to refer to the runbooks calling other runbooks and the runbooks being called by other runbooks. You can say inner or outer, you can say the referencing and the reference runbook. And nested runbooks kind of works both ways. So in explanations, I will try to avoid that, so to avoid ambiguities. This is my runbook for the demo, and it's the inner runbook. For the inner runbook, I would just add a manual step here, first step, and we're going to put some parameters in it so that we can see how the parameters will be mapped in the end.
Inner runbook is the frame, the procedure that contains all the bits and pieces that are done, isn't it?
So, well, it's the other way around. So this is the one that will be called by the others. So this will have the actual payload in it, and the outer will be the shell or the wrapper.
Cool, got it.
So let's add in some parameters. I'm going to call them, give them some better names. So we have a string parm. We will have an integer parm. Let's put in enumeration as well. while we're at it, can do this quite easily. So we're going to have a string parameter with the default options. We're going to have an integer parameter. Make that a bit more restricted. So we want values between 0 and 100. Maybe it's a percentage. And we're going to have a default value of 50. 0 to 100 with default of 50. And an enumeration parameter. We introduced those a while ago. It's very nice to give a specific set of stuff to the user where they can only choose from. That basically prevents somebody from doing a wrong entry. So I'm going to just use the 5 workdays. Means that nobody can accidentally put in a Saturday or a Sunday. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. I'm going to add an automated step as well. Let's do this heartbeat check. So this automation will check whether a specific system has a security vulnerability and is still vulnerable to the heartbeat vulnerability. And we're going to say that for the user, we will always use the root user, but the target of the system will always be the new runbook parameter target. So now we have 4 parameters: the string parameter, the integer, the enumeration parameter, and the target for our automation. So I'm going to publish the runbook. Very important here, you can't reference draft runbook. If you want to build nested runbooks, all the runbooks have to be published. There is a simple reason for that, because draft runbooks may change anytime and they may add or remove parameters all the time. If you're adding a parameter that is mandatory, but the outer runbook, which is referencing the runbook that has changed, doesn't know about this parameter yet, you can't execute it anymore. So this is more like a fail-safe to have a little bit more stability in the system, and prevents you from creating runbooks that can't be executed because the drafts underneath are changing all the time. So I'm going to remove that search here. So we have our inner runbook here, and I will copy that. So we have a second one just to have to move along a little bit more quickly. And I'm going to publish that one as well. So now we have 2 ones. They have the same content, but it should be good to show how the concept works. So for the outer runbook, this is the one referencing the others. We can mix and match as we like. So I can add a manual step here. I want this step alongside the runbook step. And then we can add our nested runbook. So let's see what happens if I want to add the inner runbook. It will tell me to do the parameter mappings. And if you have ever added an automation to a runbook, you will know this dialog because it's the same. And this dialog has a lot of capability in it. It's a little bit non-obvious at points. But for these parameters, since we have not created any parameters before, we have a limited set available. So we can create a new parameter, or we can decide to use a fixed value. That means that every time we will do this, this value will now be assigned. For this one here, I will put in Watson AIOps all the time. Now, for this one here, because we have defined a default value, you could use the default value. Let's use this. So we are using default value. It shows it here, but it's not editable. We're always going to use 50. For this one, we can create a new parameter. And now you can see it already pre-populated the new parameter to match what the other parameter in the nested in the reference runbook is bringing us. We can still change the description. We can use a new name if we want to. So we can use that like day of the week instead. But the content here cannot be changed so that when we are moving it along, it will still be a valid input for that parameter. And then the target system for our automation. For this runbook, I know that I want to run it on a specific server. Like that's one of my servers. So I'm going to put that in here so that the operator doesn't have to enter it anymore. This way, we have condensed the 4 parameters of the nested runbook, the inner one, into one that is outside visible. So this is one important feature that you can leverage. You can have runbooks with a lot of parameters and a lot of options in them, but when you're exposing them via an outer runbook that refers to them, you can condense those down to a specific set, so you can narrow what they are doing, but also simplify in the same way. A good example could be if you have an automation that takes a lot of parameters, like a very generic one that opens maybe a ticket on your ticketing system, and typically you have a lot of fields you can put into a ticket. But if you have a specific use case where you say, this is a specific ticket, 8 out of the 12 parameters will always be exactly this value, you can now create a runbook and put in the automation, or a runbook and condense that down from 12 parameters to only 4 that need to be entered, making it much easier for the operator to put in the right values and prevent wrong data entry. So we have this inner runbook added, and I'm going to add the other one as well. And now that we have one parameter already, we can use the parameter that's already there. And because that's a string parameter and this one is also a string parameter, they could basically have the same value, but I'm going to use the fixed value here as well. And for this one, I will create a new parameter. Again, it lets me copy the values of the inner runbook and only change what I want to present. So we could use that as a percentage and say, I don't want a default value for that, or a different default value for that, and save that one as well. And the target, I will once again use my system that I can connect to. I'm going to publish this runbook. Before I do that, you can see on the right-hand side, we do have this actions section here, which was there before, but now you can see that the runbooks on the right-hand side, the inner runbook and the inner runbook number 2, provide a specific step. So you have an easy overview where you are using the nested runbook feature. This is basically the look for the runbook authors. How can they create those runbooks? If I go to the runbook and go into the preview mode, I can see the runbook in what we call a flat representation. So on the left-hand side, you can now see all the steps resolved into what the parameter mappings and the runbook steps have been done. So we do have step 1, then we do have step 2.1. So this indicates there is nested runbook magic going on. So this is the first runbook. We do have the 2 steps that are in this inner runbook, 2.1 and 2.2. And then it concludes, and we go into the next one, and we have 3.1 and 3.2. If we would now add a step to the runbook that is referred to in step 2, there would be a step 2.3 as well. The steps still go into the normal order, so I don't need any new skills to execute them. I just have this hint here that there is nested runbook feature going on. As always, you can look at different versions. And if I run the runbook, I need to enter the day of the week. As we saw before, I can make use of the enumeration here. My percentage, if I try to enter something outside of the range, tell me I can only do what's been done here. And you saw before that the default value changed from 50 to 0 because that's how we remapped it in the runbook. There is a new tab on the right-hand side. Again, we do have the actions and the nested runbooks, and we can see what kind of assets provide the content for specific things here. So the inner runbook provides the steps 2.1 and 2.2, and the automation for the heartbeat check is used in the steps 2.2 and 3.2. Just a nice overview of where reused assets are leveraged in this runbook. And then I can skip through these steps just normally doing my things that I need to do. I can run those automations. This one will use a testing script, an open source testing script, to check whether a specific application on my server is vulnerable to the heartbeat vulnerability. Thankfully, I'm not vulnerable, so I can just go on. And you can see here that the content of those steps, these values here, have been fixed. So from the outside, they will appear as fixed values, where this one here has been mapped as a parameter that I can change on the right-hand side. So if I change the percentage here, 75, and update, you can see the update here as well. So that's one of the points. In this case, we are hiding the complexity because we are remapping a parameter to a fixed value. In this case, we are not hiding the complexity. We are putting it upwards to the outer runbook and having it controllable by the parameters on the outside. This is the same automation again. I'm going to skip that. And now I'm done with the runbook. I give it 5 stars, demo run, and say it worked. And now I can see here on the screen that this runbook now has the rating and success rate updated. The inner ones do not, so we're only tracking the execution and statistical updates on the outside ones. If I run these independently as standalone runbooks, then they will have their rating and their success rate updated. I can go on for quite some time on this because there is a lot of small things to discuss. One thing I haven't covered yet is the automation output mapping. So as you may know, you can use the output of a previous automation and use it as the input for another step. Typically, it's for another automation, but it can be for a manual step as well. If you want to use that, you can also, this will work with the nested runbook features, even if the step numbers change over time, because depending on how many steps are in here and how many steps are in here, the overall step number of the outer runbook will change. Same as for the go-to elements. So if there is a go-to inside one of the inner runbook that goes to the end of that runbook, it will go to the next step of the outer runbook instead. So these are also automatically resolved and updated. And of course, you can still use the username mapping to use the currently logged in user for a parameter.
When we go to the efficiency dashboard, do nested runbooks count as multiple runbooks in execution, or are they just one?
They are just one. So we try to make that as clear and as easy to use as possible. So it will count as one execution of a runbook, like this one here. We're not counting inner runbook and inner runbook 2 as being executed at this point. But if you want to have a closer look at those statistics and want to create ones for yourself, you have the possibility of pulling in the data via the API, because in the execution records, if you pull them, you can find out which of the execution records had more than one runbook or had a nested runbook in them. And then you can apply your own statistics on them. But for us, we still see it as one runbook execution. It's a more complex runbook, but it's still one runbook. Maybe we want to update the way of counting in the future, but for now it is this way.
Yeah, makes sense. I like it.
Okay, thank you. I hope everybody else likes it too. We are very excited because this is honestly a lot of work to get it done, and it's an exciting new capability. And I hope that many people will adopt it and get their runbook library even more efficient than before. So I have provided a second scenario after going through the basics on how to create the nested runbooks and map those parameters. I have a small fake company called Acme. So they have these 4 things here. So what they are doing is they have a very tight security on their service. Every time you want to log in, you first need to get clearance. So you can't just log into the system. And then they also have their own secure login procedure, which is not just logging in. They need to do something before that. If you go back to the slides that we showed before, you will see that this is like one of the examples that we provided, where the clearance and the secure login to the server will always be used by almost every runbook, because they are corporate-wide company mandates. And if that procedure is updated, it will need to be updated in all of the runbooks. For this example, I have 2 ones. One is resolve an outdated web server, and the other one is reconfigure the environment of a Node.js application. Let's have a look at the get clearance runbook. They have to go to a server clearance web service, fill out the template. They have some parameters to enter, what kind of stuff they want to do, and then they get an email with the clearance indicating the allowed change window. And then we have the other one, the secure login to the server. And again, they have a web interface of a login server where the operator needs to go to. They log in with their login credentials, select the hostname from the list of servers, and then they get a one-time token. With the one-time token, they can finally do an SSH login on the server. Again, we're making use of the parameter features here for username and hostname. Now, when we have the example here for resolving the outdated web server, this is how the runbook looks like right now. So it has to get clearance and the login steps, and they would have to be updated whenever an update happens. So we're going to refactor that one here, make it using the nested runbook feature. So I'm going to add the nested runbook steps for get clearance. Now it will tell us, oh, you need to have a server name, an app name, and a type. For this one here, we're going to resolve an outdated web server. So type will always be HTTPD. App name will always be the Apache web server. And the server name will be a new runbook parameter, because we want to be able to connect to different servers for this one. Then we're going to push it up, because it's going to be the very first step that we want, and remove the previous manual get clearance step. Same thing for login. Going to use the secure login to server runbook. Again, we have the host name and the username. Luckily for us, we already have the host name for the other nested runbook that we included. We can reuse the same semantic here and map it to the single parameter. And then for the username, we're going to add the logged in user. So you don't need to enter your username anymore. We'll always use the user you are logged in as. So there's no identity theft going on. If you're already logged in as Sebastian, you can only log in as Sebastian. Same thing for Fred and everybody else. Okay, so we're going to delete the login step. And now we have successfully nested our runbook.
That's easy.
We can publish it right here. And we could do the same thing for the example 2. But let's say if I run this, you can now see all the steps here. I'm not going to run this right now. I'm going to cancel it here. But let's say the login to server procedure changes. We're going to edit that here. So maybe the server location changes. They have a new one, the login 2022 server, or maybe 23. So it's for the next year. They want to start using it now. They published this one here. And if I run the resolve outdated web server right here, you can see this one changed. Just easy as that, without having to change a million runbooks. I now only have to use one runbook change and can affect a lot of runbooks that all use the basic login procedure. So that concludes the short demo scenario of the Acme Corporation. I'm sure you can think of a lot of different scenarios for yourself or for others. As I said, there are a lot of features available. Even though nested runbooks can be explained with like a single sentence, you can say it's the capability of putting one runbook into another and then stop at that. It doesn't hint at what you are actually capable of doing with it. And there are probably a lot of people out there who can devise some really clever scenarios where you can fully exploit the capabilities of this feature. This is not the end of the nested runbook feature. There are some other things we are planning for the future to even enhance it even more. But for now, that's all I have to show. So I'm handing it back to Fred.
And we never confess what we're going to do in the future. Yeah, cool. I like it. Great enhancement to our existing runbook automation capability within the product suite. Thank you for the demo. I really liked it. It shows how quite easily it is to integrate into existing runbooks. And I also like the fact that it's addressing quite a number of use cases in here. So it makes the creation and usability and maintainability of runbooks way easier if you're in a large environment. So if you just have 10 runbooks, you may not care so much, but if you have the hundreds or even more of those runbooks, then this kind of functionality makes absolutely sense.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Cool, yeah. So that concludes the demonstration. We're not done yet. One more thing to mention is, yes, of course, we do have documentation. So here's the link. Use your favorite web search engine to find it, or if you already know where Cloud Pak for Watson AIOps documentation is, make sure you select the latest version, 3.6. It's not in the versions before. 3.6 is the one you need. And in there, you can find adding nested runbooks. This is where you get started in the documentation. And with that, I have to say thank you for your time you spent watching this video. I hope you liked it. I liked to create it. And I also want to say thank you, Sebastian, for preparing all this stuff and the demo. If there's anything else you want to see from us, recorded, discussed, then just let us know. The email is in the front page of this video. Give me a hint, a shout, and I'm happy to produce the content. And with that, I wish you a nice year ending, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Take it easy and have a safe time. Bye. Thank you.